Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi, 1 week at a time, Masechet Makot. This is our second class in this Masechet, which we started last week, or 2 weeks ago really. And last week. No, 2 weeks ago. And we are going to be reviewing Daf 9 through 15. I think it's important to just mention that in Israel, we just began the eve of Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I just want to dedicate our learning tonight to the memories of the 6 million. And, may we remember and never forget what happened in our past and look forward to a positive, hopeful future, Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, Daf 9. So we are in the middle of discussing the concept. In Hebrew, it's called galut. Now, it literally means exile, but here it does not mean a national exile, rather a personal exile. We discussed that when a person accidentally murders someone, they they have the ability to run to the city of refuge, to the miklat, and that city is as it says, a refuge for this murderer, so that the family members of the person who was killed cannot kill the person in revenge. So the question is, who's allowed to go to the miklat, to the city of refuge? So the Gemara tells us on Daf 9 that what's called a ger toshav. Ger toshav is a non-Jew that lives in Israel, and he has taken upon himself some sort of either respect for Judaism. It could be that the person is not an idolater. It could be that they keep the 7 Noachide laws. But our Gemara on Daf 9 tells us that this ger toshav does not go to the miklat. He's considered a non-Jew, and non-Jews do not go to the city of refuge. However, the Mishnah did say that if he killed another ger toshav, he does go to the miklat, but not if he kills a Jew. So it depends how the person was killed. And as we had mentioned last week, if a person is killed with a downward motion, that's when a Jew goes to exile. So then the ger toshav will also go to exile. But if it was an upward motion, when the Jew is exempt, the ger toshav does not go to galut. If the ger toshav thought that it was an animal in the bushes, but really it was a person, so this is not what we would call a regular accident. Right? Again, we talk about a murderer, bishogeg. Bishogeg literally means either by accident or unintentional. But as we saw last time, and we'll see again this time, it doesn't mean completely an accident. There needs to be some intent. But let's say the ger toshav, if he thought there was an animal in the bushes, but really it's a person, so maybe he is liable, whereas a Jew would not be liable. The idea is that he should have been more careful, or maybe he would be exempt because, again, how would he know? And it is, it's not his fault, and therefore he is exempt. The Gemara brings the story of Avimelech. Avimelech was the king who took Sarah, Abraham and Sarah come to the city, and Abraham says, she's my sister, so Avimelech takes her to sleep with her, and he thought that it was okay. But God says, no, in a dream, you're actually liable. And the Gemara asks, or the Gemara says, what do you mean he's liable? He's liable because he should have looked into it more, right? As the ruler, as the one in charge, he could have verified, and he didn't, and therefore he was responsible, right? Avimelech says, I didn't do anything wrong, and God doesn't respond, which seems to imply that God agrees, or no, God doesn't agree, and basically God does respond and says, return her, right? And you should have known who came to town, right? And it shows that a non-Jew gets punished for ignorance, meaning even something that he could have, he said, how was I supposed to know? And the Gemara seems to imply he should have known. Okay, the next Mishnah tells us that a blind person who kills does not go to the Ir Miklat, or maybe he does. A person who hates another person, right? He's called a soneh. He hates, or he's an enemy. He does go to the Ir Miklat if he kills the person that he hates, or no, he actually gets killed and he does not go to the Ir Miklat. And it depends if he killed intentionally or unintentionally. So the Gemara explains, right, a person needs to have the ability to see in order to go to the Ir Miklat. Therefore, if he's blind, he cannot go to the Ir Miklat, or not, maybe it is not necessarily the case, and even if the person is blind, they can go to the Ir Miklat. The soneh, right, a person who hates another person, the Gemara explains it's as if he is pre-warned. It's as if someone warned him not to kill. So too what's called a chaver, right? A chaver is someone who knows the laws, and therefore, even if you didn't warn them, they are still responsible. The Gemara talks about this concept of the soneh, somebody who hates the other person. If he was like lifting someone and the rope snapped, so then he does go to exile because that's obviously an accident. But if the rope slipped out of his hand, so then the person does not go to exile because you can't prove. If it was someone that you loved, someone that you didn't hate, so then that person, even if the rope slipped out of their hands, the person would go to the Ir Miklat. Okay, next Mishnah. When we use the word galut, it means to go to, as we said, exile means to go to the Ir Miklat, to the city of refuge. Where were they? So there were 3 on the other side of the Jordan River and 3 inside Israel. And they worked, right? They all worked together when they were, right? They only functioned when all 6 were set up. You have to make sure that there are clear signs to get to the city. And you need to send 2 Torah scholars to accompany the murderer, so that if the family member, what is called the Goel Hadam, right, the person who is seeking vengeance, if the Goel Hadam, right, wants to kill him on the way, you send these sages to protect him. We'll see what that means. What do? The Mishnah says that they speak to the Goel Hadam and they tell him, listen, it was an accident, don't kill him, he doesn't deserve it, he didn't mean it, etc. At first, anyone who killed anybody ran to an Ir Miklat, and then they would be called to court, and then the court would decide, was it an accident and they go back, or, right, was it not an accident and on purpose and he deserves to get killed, or less than that and doesn't need to go to the city of refuge. So now the Gemara explains, Moshe set up 3 cities on the other side of the Jordan, right? We know that Moshe does not go into Israel, and he's on the other side of the Jordan River, and he sets up the 3 Arei Miklat, the 3 cities of refuge on the outside, and Joshua sets up the 3 that are parallel to them inside of Israel. The Gemara says that you have to actually divide the country into 3 and make sure that each city is equidistant from the other. Daf 10 tells us that there were a lot of murderers in Gilad, which is on the other side of the Jordan, and therefore they needed more arei miklat over there. Shechem also had a lot of murderers, and therefore they needed to be closer to an ir miklat. Now the Gemara adds that not only were there 6 cities in total, but there are 42 cities of the Leviim, of the Levites, and these cities also were cities of refuge for the accidental murderers. You need to be actually in the city in order to be protected, and if not, you were not protected. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. The Gemara talks about different cities. Hebron is an ir miklat. Kadesh is an ir miklat. It needs to be an average-sized city with a natural water source, with villages around. They cannot sell weapons in the city. That would be very dangerous, or traps. We're concerned that maybe the Goel Hadam will come to the city and then kill the murderer. The murderer's teacher, his Rav, goes with him into exile to the ir miklat. The Gemara then puts a side note, therefore make sure that you have proper students. So thank you all for being proper students. Maybe the whole yeshiva goes to the city. The Gemara says that the Torah can save you from the angel of death, but not till exile, till you go to the ir miklat. And since we mentioned the Torah saving someone from death, the Gemara has a story of Rav Chisda who was learning Torah, and every time he would learn Torah, the angel of death couldn't kill him. So what did he do? And we actually have a similar story of David HaMelech with this, the angel of death sits on a tree and it broke. And when the Rav Chisda heard the tree breaking, he looked up for a second, and in that moment, the angel of death was able to take him. The Gemara says that Reuven, meaning Yaakov's son, started the concept of refuge, He said not to kill Yosef, therefore his ir miklat is mentioned first, the one in the tribe of Reuven. The Gemara says you have to really make sure that the murderer is set up in the ir miklat, make sure he has what he needs. Moshe, as we mentioned, did the mitzvah of building the ir miklat, even though it wouldn't work till Yoshua would build the other 3 on the other side. The Gemara talks about a Torah scholar should learn Torah, but with other people. It's very important not to only learn by yourself, but to share your Torah with a lot of people. We said that we clear a path to the ir miklat. We said 2 people. So the Gemara says that God will guide the murderer. So the Gemara explains, what does that mean? Let's say there were 2 people who killed, one on purpose and one by accident, but there were no witnesses in either case. So God makes sure that there's justice. How? They both end up in an inn, The Gemara tells a story, Both these people end up in an inn, and the one who killed on purpose sits under a ladder, coincidentally, and then the one who killed by accident climbs up the ladder, but slips and accidentally kills the guy who killed on purpose, So the one who killed on purpose gets killed because there's justice in the world. And then the one who kills by accident, people saw what happened, and now he runs and he goes to the ir miklat. So everyone in the end, gets what they deserve. And with this, the Gemara tells us that God helps us go on the path that we choose, right? We need to choose if we're going on the, I guess we can call it the right path or the wrong path. But God doesn't choose for us, and God helps us go along the path that we choose. If the Goel Hadam, that's the relative of the person who was killed, if he finds the murderer on his way to the Ir Miklat and he kills him, he's exempt, meaning he cannot be taken to court. He is allowed to kill him. Now, we said that there are two Torah scholars that go with him. They try to convince him that it was an accident and not to kill him. If a city is there's so many murderers there that the majority of the city are murderers, it cannot be an Ir Miklat. That's already too much. There also need to be elders who live in the city. This seems to protect the murderer when he gets there. Daf 11, God instructs Yoshua that he must make the Ir Miklat because it is a mitzvah, right? It is a commandment that he must do this. And Yoshua delayed the building of these cities, and therefore God was very harsh with him and told him he needed to build it right away. And the Gemara now talks about the last 8 verses in the Torah, how they were written by Yoshua, or maybe Yoshua wrote them these ideas in his own Torah, right? The concept of the commandment to build these Ir Miklat. Okay, the next Mishnah is going to describe how a person gets out of the Ir Miklat, right? We know how he goes in, but does he stay there forever? When is he allowed to leave? So the Mishnah says that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest that was anointed at the time that the person killed by accident, or if he wasn't anointed, but he had the clothing, right, the 8 pieces of clothing of a Kohen Gadol, or he was a Kohen Gadol at some point, right, for a time. When that Kohen Gadol dies, then the murderer is allowed to leave the Ir Miklat. And therefore, the Mishnah tells us that the mothers of the Kohen Gadol would give the exiled people food and clothing, right? They would send like packages so that they wouldn't pray for their sons to die, right? So it was kind of like this idea that I'll send you whatever you want, just don't pray for my son to die, because that would be then, right? If they prayed for the son to die, then God might listen to them and he would die. The Gemara explains that this is all based on verses. And the question is why? What does it have to do with the Kohen Gadol? What's the connection? So the Gemara explains that the Kohen Gadol, again, he is the religious leader of the time, and therefore he should have prayed for the mercy of the generation. And therefore, if the murderer prays for him to die, so then he might pray for him to die, because there seems to have been some sort of fault. The Gemara says that we learn from here that the curse of a sage, of a chacham, even if it's for no reason, will actually come true, right? It's going to happen. This is learned from Achitophel. Achitophel, if you remember, when King David was excavating the foundation of the temple, and all of a sudden the waters of the depths started coming. So David didn't know what to do. So he thought, right, so he asked, does anyone know what to do? What can I do? And if they know what to do and they don't tell me, they're going to die. And then eventually Achitophel says, if you put a piece of pottery with God's name on it, it's going to stop. Now, right, if God lets his name be erased for Shalom Bayit, right, which we saw in the Sota ceremony, so then for sure he will do that to save the temple. However, now Achitophel does tell him what to do, but because he hesitated and didn't tell him right away, so then he ends up being cursed. The Gemara says even if the curse of a tzaddik, of a righteous person, is conditional, it will also come true, right? And this is learned from Eli, right? Eli is the priest, and he wants Shmuel, right, Samuel, to tell him if he heard a prophecy, and even though he does tell him, the curse does come true. Okay. And since we're talking about things on condition, right? If someone is excommunicated and it's with a condition, so it needs to be nullified. And this, of course, is learned from Yehuda, who was going to be in Cherem if they didn't bring Binyamin back. Remember when Yehuda wants to bring Benjamin down to Yosef, and he says, I'll be in Cherem, right? You can excommunicate me if I don't bring Benjamin back, but he does bring him back. But for 40 years in the desert, right, the bones of Yehuda were rattling in the coffin, right? So if you didn't realize, the coffins of the brothers, meaning Joseph and all his brothers, were taken from Egypt to Israel, and it seems that the bones of Yehuda were rattling because of this statement till Moshe prayed for him, and then his bones kind of settled. Okay, right? It says, right? Moshe said, right? Yehuda got Reuven to admit his sin, but still they didn't let Yehuda come into the Beit Midrash of heaven till Moshe davened for him, and that was the bracha that let him, right, that gave the bones or the soul of Yehuda his rest. You might have thought that maybe we mentioned a number of different Kohanim. However, you might think that you need all three of them to die or only one. So if he was judged and there was no Kohen Gadol at that time, and he goes to the city of refuge, so then he can never leave the miklat. Okay, so now the Mishnah is going to talk about this. If after the conviction, right, again, the court has to convict him as a murderer bishogeg, right? Again, either accidental or unintentional. So if after conviction, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, dies, so then he doesn't even need to go to the miklat. It's as if he was there and he was released. If before the conviction, the Kohen Gadol died, and they appointed a new one, and then they convicted him, so then he can leave the miklat when the second one dies. If they convict him, and there is no Kohen Gadol at the time, or the Kohen Gadol was the one who was killed, or the Kohen Gadol is the one who's on trial for murder, so then that person goes to the miklat, and they can never leave. They need to stay there forever. The Gemara, the Mishnah says that the person, let's say, right, they go to the miklat, they cannot leave, right? There's no such thing as like vacation from the miklat. Even if he has testimony about something, about Rosh Chodesh, right, the new moon, or if the nation needs him, right? Let's say he is a great warrior and there's a war, he cannot leave. And the city and what's called the Tchum, if you remember, every city has 2,000 amot around it. That's like either gardens or field. That protects the murderer. And if the murderer left this protected area and the Goel Hadam comes and murders him outside, so then, and now it's a machloket. Right? Is it a mitzvah for him to kill the murderer? Right? And if somebody else sees him, they can also kill him? Or no, the relative is allowed to kill him, but it's not a mitzvah, and no one else is allowed to kill him. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to explain. Maybe if the person never went to the miklat at all, that's not okay. The Gemara says no, as long as the Kohen Gadol dies, he does not go to the Ir Miklat, meaning it's seen as an atonement, and therefore he doesn't even need to go to the Ir Miklat. If the Kohen Gadol was anointed during the case, and then the murderer goes free, then the murderer goes free when he dies. Again, the question is why? As we said, right, he should have been praying for him to be innocent, and therefore there seems to be a connection between the spiritual leader of the time and these murderers who again are unintentional. If the murderer, the Rotzeach, died before getting to the Ir Miklat, he's buried there. If he dies and then the Kohen Gadol dies, so then you can take his bones out of the Ir Miklat and bury them wherever the family is buried. If the Kohen Gadol is disqualified, right, for some reason it turns out he shouldn't have been the Kohen Gadol in the first place, it's as if there's no Kohen Gadol and the person can never come out, and it's as if it's like disqualified retroactively. Daf number 12. Okay, that we can't. We said you can't leave the Ir Miklat even if you're a general like Yoav and the nation needs you. So since we mentioned Yoav, we're going to mention Yoav now. Yoav, right, was the general. He made two mistakes, right? David tells his son Shlomo when he dies to go and kill Yoav because he killed Avner and Amasa. So Yoav runs to the tabernacle, right? There's no temple yet because Shlomo is going to build the temple. So he runs to the Mishkan and he holds onto the altar. So the Gemara tells us that he made two mistakes. One is that he held onto the corner, but he didn't go on the roof, on the top of the Mizbeach. And the roof of the Mizbeach, the top, is what would have saved him, not holding on to the corner. Number two is only the altar in the temple, in the Beit HaMikdash, would save him, and not the altar in the Mishkan, and that's why he wasn't saved. Or only Kohanim are saved when they're doing the temple service, but not a random person who runs in and holds on to the Mizbeach. The Gemara says you cannot be buried in an Ir Miklat. However, the murderer is buried there. But a Levi, right, again, if it's a city of Levi'im, of Levites, if they live there, they need to be buried outside of the city, not in the city. We said that the Tchum, right, the 2,000 amot around the city will save the person, but he needs to live in the city. And it was actually very eerie, like the Gemara talks about that the murderer is not allowed to live in a tunnel underneath the Tchum of the city, which is like a crazy statement, since we're dealing with tunnels now. But a Levi can, right? The Levi can. We said that it's a machloket if the Goel Hadam must kill the murderer if he leaves the Ir Miklat. Is it a mitzvah or is it reshut, right? Is it permissible, but it's not obligatory? Okay, so the Gemara explains that if the Rotzeach, if the murderer leaves the Ir Miklat, if he does it on purpose or even by accident, so then the Goel Hadam can kill him. Or he cannot be killed if he left by accident. He can only be killed if he left on purpose. But if he left by accident, you just send him back to the city. If a father killed a son accidentally, another son becomes the Goel Hadam, and can kill the father. Or no, a son can never kill his father, even if it's a mitzvah. Or the Gemara says maybe this discussion is about a grandfather, which is a different type of relationship. Okay, next Mishnah at the bottom of Daf 12, a tree, right? Let's say we have a tree in an ir miklat. So the trunk is inside the city and the branches are outside. Or the opposite, the trunk is outside and the branches are inside. We go according to the branches. So if the rotzeach, right, if the murderer is sitting in the branches and it's outside of the tchum, outside of the area around the city, so then if the goel adam comes, he can kill him. He's seen as outside. But if the branches go into the city, if he's sitting inside the city, so then the goel adam cannot kill him. So now the Gemara speaks about another case where we have trees, speaking about Maaser Sheni, right? Maaser Sheni is a tithe that a person took to eat in Jerusalem. And let's say, again, there's a tree, and part of the tree is inside Jerusalem, and part of the tree is outside. So it's considered to be inside. The Gemara says, no, maybe it's only according to the branches. And then the Gemara says, no, you can't compare it to an ir miklat, because an ir miklat is about living, right? You need to live in the city. Now, you don't live on the tree trunk, you live in the branches, right? Think tree house. And because we're talking about living, wherever you could live, which is the branches, right? That's where we decide if it's seen as in or out. What about a cave, right? We go according to the opening, right? If the opening, again, for Maaser Sheni, you have to be in Yerushalayim. If the opening is in Jerusalem, so then it's seen as Jerusalem. Even if the rest of the cave goes out of Jerusalem, the opening is in Jerusalem, it's seen as in Jerusalem, and the opposite is not. Okay. If the murderer is on a branch outside of the city, we say that the goel hadam can kill him, right? The machloket is about a trunk, and can it be used as a stepping stool for the branches? Okay, next Mishnah. A person kills someone bishogeg, again, accidentally, in the ir miklat, in the city of refuge. So then he needs to go to another part of the city, right? This idea of leaving his home, and he needs to go to another part of the city. If a Levi, right, if a Levite kills, he needs to go to another city of refuge. So the Gemara says a verse teaches that the camp of the Levi'im is like the Arei Miklat, like the city of refuge, right? In the desert, they could run to where the Levi'im encamped, right? If you know what the encampment of the Jews looked like in the desert, you had the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the middle, which is called the Kohanim's camp. You had the Levites all around. That was where they lived. That's called the camp of the Levi'im. And then you had all the other tribes. That is called the tribe of, right, the camp of Yisrael, right? So there are three camps. So the Ir Miklat is like that middle camp of the Levi'im. Okay. If the people, so next Mishnah, if the people in the Ir Miklat want to honor the murderer, he needs to tell them, no, don't honor me. I'm a murderer, right? And this is based on a verse, Daf 13, right? The Rotzeach does need to pay rent to the Levi'im, or no, it was free and they didn't need to pay. When the exile ends, they can return to their original position of prominence, right? If the person was a great rabbi, a great judge, and then they killed someone by accident and they went to the Ir Miklat, when they come home, can they return to that position, or no, they cannot return to that position. The Gemara speaks about, when we're speaking about rent, the machloket is for the 6 cities of refuge, if you need to pay rent, but in the 42 cities of the Levi'im, everyone agrees that they needed to pay rent. Or maybe the opposite. The machloket is in the 42 cities if they needed to pay rent or not, but everyone agrees that they don't need to pay in the 6 cities of refuge. And if a person returns to his family's prominence, again, it's a machloket if they can or they can't. With that, we finish the second chapter. As I'm sure I mentioned that, I hope I mentioned this last week. This Masechet is very short. We're actually hopefully going to finish it next week. It ends next either Thursday or Friday. So hopefully we will finish it together next week. So now we are going to start the third chapter, and this chapter is going to be talking about lashes, right? Makot, which is literally, right, which is the name of the Masechet, right? Makot literally means hitting, but it means lashes. Lashes was a type of corporal punishment, or that was given to a person. We're going to find out who and why and how it worked. So the Mishnah tells us the following people get lashes, and we're going to see that these are people who are liable for the punishment of karet, right? Karet literally means to be cut off. It is a punishment that is given by God. We don't know exactly what it means or how it is done, but it's something that God does. And since it's something that God does, the courts here in this world give the person lashes. And we'll see why in a minute. What are the cases, right? A person who sleeps with his sister, his aunt, and other prohibited people. If you have a widow or a divorcee who marries a high priest, right? This is a forbidden relationship. Or a Jew who marries a mamzeret, an illegitimate woman, they get lashes. If a Kohen Gadol sleeps with a widow who's also a divorcee, they actually get lashes twice. We're going to see that lashes comes in sets, and one could get multiple sets. As opposed to, right, we learned, right, if someone is going to get stoned or burnt, right, you can only get killed once. But lashes, you can get multiple sets. If someone who is impure ate something that was sanctified, or he went into the temple, or he ate fats or blood, or you ate other things that were forbidden, or you ate chametz on Pesach, that was from Pesach, or you ate on Yom Kippur, or you ate food that you didn't separate truma and maaser, so then you also get lashes, even if you ate any amount, any small amount, or no, it has to be a kazayit, an olive amount. If you ate a full creature, you are liable, even if it's less than a kazayit. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to explain. Only when do you get lashes? When someone is, you also get it for other things, but right now we're talking about a person who's liable for karet. He also gets lashes, and not, as we said, capital punishment. Capital punishment, you do not get lashes, and therefore our Mishnah is according to Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara tells us that there's actually a 3-way machloket. One is that, as we said, karet plus lashes. Another opinion is that even for capital punishment, you could also get lashes, or you don't even get lashes for karet, right? That's the third opinion. Right? A verse teaches us that lashes is connected to karet. Now, you only get lashes for a transgression that is negative, a negative commandment. It says, don't do this, and you did it. And it must have an action. If it's now we're going to learn a few terms. So the term in Hebrew is lav, or Aramaic. Lav, Aramaic in Hebrew. Lav hanitak le'aseh means a negative commandment that's connected to a positive commandment, right? Don't do this. You need to do this. Now, the Gemara tells us that type of transgression does not get lashes. It needs to, right? The transgression needs to parallel the prohibition of muzzling. It says, do not muzzle your animal when he's threshing, and you do, right? If you do, you get lashes. It needs to be a negative commandment that has an action, right? And therefore, the Gemara says, right, you're only liable for one evil deed that you do. Therefore, you can't get capital punishment and lashes. Or maybe that verse is teaching that you can't get capital punishment and pay, right? We've seen that before. But maybe you could get capital punishment and lashes, because it's seen as one long punishment. If you only, let's say, warned the person, don't do that or you're going to get lashes, and you didn't mention that they could die, it's a machloket if that works or not. And so in general, we've seen that a person needs to be warned before they can be punished. But for things that are karet, you do not need a warning. And therefore, you can get lashes if you were warned. Daf 14, Rabbi Yitzchak says, no lashes with karet. Right, it says, right, you can't sleep with your sister. It's singled out to say that you get karet, and you only, according again to the third opinion, to Rabbi Yitzchak, you only get karet, but you don't get lashes. Right, Rabbanan say that it was taken out to teach that every isur, every prohibition is seen as a prohibition, and therefore you would, let's say, if you did it by accident, you would have to bring 3 different korbanot, right, a sacrifice for each prohibition. Right, you get karet if you sleep with your sister from your mother or your sister from your father. The Gemara goes through, right, 2 separate prohibitions. There's one for making now we're moving on to something else, right? For making the oil that was used to anoint. So there's a prohibition to make it, and there's a prohibition to use it. And even though it's 2 transgressions and only 1 mention of karet, you get karet for both of those things. We said if it's someone who's impure goes into the temple, they get karet. This is based on a verse. Same thing with a person who is impure who eats sanctified meat, also based on a verse. Okay, when it says don't, right, there's a verse that says don't touch something that's sanctified if you're impure. Now, and then you'll get punished. So we can't learn that, it says don't touch something that is sanctified if you're impure. So the Gemara says we have to learn that you can't eat something that's sanctified, right, because something that's sanctified and the temple are connected, and therefore you get lashes if you touch it, and if you eat it, then you get karet. Now the Gemara says, no, right, you don't get karet if you eat kodesh. You don't get karet if you eat something that was sanctified, right, a sacrificial meat, before they sprinkle the blood onto the altar, or maybe yes. Okay, last daf for today, daf 15. We talked about a positive commandment and a negative commandment, right? And we said that only a negative commandment, if you transgress it, you get lashes. And if it's connected to a positive one, you don't. Now the Gemara says that if the positive commandment comes before the negative one, you do get lashes. But if it comes after, then you don't. And we see this with sara'at, with leprosy, that you're not allowed to go to the temple, and that if you do, you would get lashes, or maybe you do not get lashes, right? He actually retracted his opinion. And here the Gemara says, let's try to find other cases where we have a positive and then a negative commandment, and let's see if the person gets lashes or not. The Gemara brings up two cases. One is about someone who violates a woman. He needs to marry her, and he's not allowed to divorce her. But if he does divorce her, we basically just force him to remarry her. If he's a Kohen, he's not allowed to marry a divorcee, and therefore he gets lashes. So the question is, why doesn't the Yisrael also get lashes? Right? It's a positive commandment and then a negative commandment. So the Gemara says no, because it's actually a negative commandment and then a positive commandment, you do not get lashes. And the Gemara says that it's not like, remember we mentioned the commandment of muzzling, right? We need there to be an action. And the Gemara says, no, the person should still get lashes for a negative commandment that has, again, the positive before it. And then the Gemara discusses nullifying the commandment. What does that mean, right? If he nullified the commandment, meaning he can never do it, then he gets lashes. But if he doesn't nullify it, then he would get lashes, right? In our case, with the person who violates a woman, he can always remarry her, therefore he doesn't get lashes. But let's say you create a case where he could not marry her, so then that is seen as nullifying the commandment, and therefore he would get lashes. The last thing is something that's called hatra'a safek, a warning with a doubt. What does that mean? Right? There's a machloket if you give a warning, but you're not sure if the person is going to do it or not. Does it count as a valid warning or not? Right? And the Gemara gives a case, and we'll pick it up again next week. That if someone says, "I'm going to eat," I swear I'm going to eat this bread today, and then they didn't, so he doesn't get lashes because. Right, so everyone agrees he doesn't get lashes. So the question is why? One reason is because he didn't do an action, right? He just didn't eat bread. So you can't give him lashes for not eating bread. Another reason that he wouldn't get lashes is because, again, they had to warn him, you better make sure to eat the bread, right? Or I'm not sure. They didn't know if he was ever going to eat the bread, and therefore this warning with a doubt is not really a warning, and therefore he would not get lashes. Okay, we are going to stop here, and the Ezrat Hashem pick it up next time. Oh, I just realized that next week, Wednesday, is actually Yom HaAtzmaut. So I'm going to see if I can move it. Maybe I'll teach Thursday night instead. Do any of you have a preference Tuesday night, which is Yom HaZikaron? That's also hard. Or Thursday night? Do you have a preference, Tuesday night or Thursday night? Okay, so I think I'll do Thursday night. Okay, I have to remember to change that. Okay, wishing everyone, yes. Oh, yeah. If anyone has any questions, comments.
I remember you teaching us in a previous lesson that if there were two punishments and one was more severe than the other, then you negate the less severe one and he gets punishment. I thought I heard a contradiction when you said just a few minutes ago that capital punishment was linked with being beaten, with lashes. Well, then how is it possible? Because you know what I mean? If you're going to kill him for something, why would you beat him first?
Correct. So that is what there was. First of all, excellent that you remember that. The rule.
I have a headache after each class.
But you see how you remember. So that rule in Aramaic is called kimle midirabamine. You don't have to remember that. But the idea is that if there are two punishments, you only get the more severe one. So that was excellent. And you're right. And that's why it was a minority opinion that said that you could get lashes and capital punishment. Okay. But we do not. That is not the way we hold. And we say that if you're going to get capital punishment, then that's what you're going to get. Another thing, I didn't mention it in the class, but the Gemara talks about, and we'll see it more next week, that lashes is meant to, I don't want to use the word inspire, but maybe force the person to repent. And the Gemara did mention that God only knows if we repent in the truest way. So when we're talking about a punishment that God is going to give, correct, so then there are lashes, because when the person repents, God will hear them, or right, it's viable. But like you said, with capital punishment, a court has no idea if you're really repenting, and they have to give, right, we didn't really learn, but really we learned in Masechet Sanhedrin, even if the person says, I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again, they still get capital punishment, right? There's no way around it. And therefore, we say that if you get capital punishment, no lashes. If you're going to get punished by God, so then there are lashes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Hi. So, hello to all the survivors who got through Pesach. We're on the other side. I was just thinking about how much, again, the, Western law has followed Torah law in a lot of these things. And there's this idea of, the guy may owe for having stolen all kinds of things. He owes all that back to the victim. He owes fines. He owes all kinds of things, but he also got caught up in what's a capital offense, and it goes on. And when they get done with everything, they just take off the table all those lesser things that he owes. He doesn't pay all the fines and pay things, but because he's going to give with his life, and they just simply, so they remove the other. And I think I recall when we went through thievery, robbery, and other things, didn't that also happen in the Torah courts, that he didn't have to pay the fines or pay back if he's going to receive capital punishment?
Correct. That's what we just said now, right? The Gemara talked about you get one punishment, right? It's either monetary or corporal punishment, but you don't get both. So yes, that is an extension to what Aliza mentioned as well. So yes, you're only going to get one, though some say that you could get both. Depending on exactly, what the case was. So it depended on the case. And the Gemara is going to continue next week, speaking about who exactly is going to get lashes and the purpose of lashes as well.
Rabbanit, where are we in the process? How many years have we been listening, and how many do we have to go?
2 more years. 2 more years.
4 more?
2 more. Two.
Oh, 2 more. I want to make sure I live to the
2 more. Shavuot in 2 years. Book your tickets now to Israel. 2 weeks. 2 years.
Oh, that's a good idea. Are we going to have a celebration?
Oh, yes. There's going to be a very
Okay.
large celebration.
Wonderful. That's something
Yes,
to look forward to.
Bezrat
Thank you.
Hashem, Bezrat
Thank
Hashem.
you.
It has been
Okay.
5.5 years, just so you should know.
Oh my gosh.
Since January 2020. So kol hakavod, all of you who have been doing this from the beginning. These are not easy subjects, and they're going to continue.
You told me something I never heard, and that's that 42 cities of the Levites and Levi'im. And I had never heard that. How did that slip by, I'm wondering?
That
So there were a lot more of the cities of refuge than just 3 and 3.
Correct. Because the idea is, if you remember, the Levi'im didn't get their own
Land.
tribal
They didn't get
land.
the land. That's
So
right.
how could they? Where would they live? So the Gemara tells us that there were 42 cities which were like public for the Levi'im, and those were also cities of refuge.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Okay, wishing everyone
Okay.
a Shavua Tov. This is, again, I just heard the President Herzog just said in the commemorative, what's it called, tekes? How do you say tekes?
I don't know. Memorial or something?
Memorial. That these 10 days between Yom HaShoah to Yom HaAtzmaut are the 10 days of sanctity, the Aseret Yemei Kedusha. So I think it's interesting to think about where today is Holocaust, tonight and tomorrow are Holocaust Remembrance Day. Next Tuesday night, Wednesday is Memorial Day, a very powerful, very, very powerful day. Obviously in Israel, but I think all over the world. And then Wednesday night, Thursday is Independence Day, which is a very celebratory, but of course, challenging this year. So we should all just feel the sanctity of these days, and really just Be'ezrat Hashem, just hear good news from now on. So wishing everyone a Shavua Tov and a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, sweetie.